Okay, welcome to lesson 38. We're going to solve one-step equations. And get out your notebook, take some notes, write the title down, and then let's talk about what equations are. How do we know something is an equation? So if we look at these, all of these have some variables and some numbers, and they all look alike. The difference is there's two of them that are equations. Equations have an equal sign. So if you look at the top, how do you know something is an equation? Which ones are the equations? You can see this one has an equal sign. It says that this side is equal to that side. And this equation says that all of this right here equals 5. So an equation has an equal sign. The others over here that are not equations, those are called expressions. Expressions are just variables and numbers and operations. So if something is an equation, it has an equal sign. And it's very important that you understand that the equal sign is in the equation. All right, when we solve an equation, our goal is to isolate the variable. Isolate the variable. That means we're trying to isolate the variable. So I'll tell you what that means. To isolate the variable, and you need to have this in your notes, so write this down. To isolate the variable means to get the variable alone on one side of the equation. So it means to get the variable. Remember, the variable is the letter. So you're trying to get the variable or the letter alone. And it needs to be alone on one side of equal sign. Okay, the way we do that is we're going to use inverse operations. So you write that down. We're going to use inverse operations to isolate the variable. Inverse means opposite. So we're going to use opposite operations to isolate the variable and get it alone. So then you need to know that the opposite of addition is subtraction. And you know that. You've learned that since like 4th grade or 3rd grade. And the opposite of multiplying or multiplication is division. And we're going to use these inverse operations to solve equations. And now let's do some practice and I'll show you what we mean. Before I do that, you need to know that whatever you do to one side of an equation, S shouldn't be there, whatever you do to one side of the equation, you must do to the other side. So whatever you do to one side of the equation, you must do to the other side. So let's do some practice. Okay, for number 1, write it down. You've got x plus 7 equals 10. And we all know that that's going to be 3, that the answer is going to be 3 because you can tell by looking at it. But what we want to do is we want to solve equations using inverse operations and isolating the variable. So if you look, you see that you have a variable x over here on the left. And what we're going to do is try to get the x alone. And whatever you do to one side of the equation, you have to do to the other. So first, now when I show you this, how to do this, I want this done a very specific way, which means you have to show your work. And I want the work shown the way I show it to you, how to do it. So first of all, draw a line where the equal sign is, because that separates the left side from the right side, and whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other. We're going to isolate x by doing the opposite of adding 7. The opposite of adding 7 is subtracting 7. So on both sides, we're going to subtract 7. This clears and goes to 0, so I have x alone. 10 minus 7 is 3. So I know that my equation is x equals 3. In order to check this, you can always substitute the 3 that you found for the x. So you would do 3 plus 7 equals 10, and obviously that checks. All right, let's do number 2. Now these will get harder as we go along, so we're just doing the very simple ones first so that I can show you and demonstrate what it is I want you to show on your paper and how to do it. So again, we have a variable m. M minus 6 equals 14. Draw a line to separate this left and the right side of the equal sign. We're going to do the opposite of subtracting 6. So instead of subtracting 6, we're going to add 6. Whatever I do to one side, I do to the other. So if I add 6, then I get 0. That's zeroed out. I've now isolated m, and 14 plus 6 is 20. I can check that if I'd like to by replacing the m with my answer. 20 minus 6, does that equal 14? Yes, it does. Go to number 3, very simple, just like we did before. You have q plus 16 equals 1. Again, draw a line that separates the left side and the right side. Do the opposite of adding 16. The opposite of adding 16 is subtracting 16. So draw a line here. Now I know that these cancel out, and I've left with q by itself. Then I have to do 1 minus 16. 1 minus 16, you do keep change on it. So you're going to get a negative 15. And I can check that if I want by substituting the negative 15 plus the 16, and does that equal 1? And yes, that does check. All right, we'll keep going here. Okay, number 4, I have r minus 33 equals 0. Draw my line to separate the left and the right side. We're going to add 33 to both sides. So I get r equals 33. And I'm not going to check. You know how to check. You can check them, but I'm not going to do that now. All right, let's go to number 5. Number 5, I have 7 equals 3 plus h. This one is different because the variable is on the right side, and that is perfectly fine. Again, I'm going to draw a line where the equal sign is to separate the left and the right side. And now my variable is over here on the right. Instead of adding 3, I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides. So that goes away. I get h equals 4. So it's kind of backwards, but it still works. All right, number 6. Now I have multiplication. So I have 6x equals 18. And this is multiplying. So now I'm going to do the opposite of multiplying. First, draw my line to separate that sides. I'm going to, instead of multiplying by 6, in order to undo that multiplication, I'm going to divide both sides by 6. That goes away, and x is equal to 3. And I know that 6 times 3 is 18. All right, let's go to number 7. Number 7, I have 2w equals negative 24. I know that my answer is going to involve 12. So again, I draw my line separating the sides. I divide both sides by the 2 that's with the w. 2 divided by 2 is 1, so that goes away. I get w equals, and then a negative 24 divided by a positive 2 would give me a negative 12. Number 8, I have negative 3x equals 12. Now this time, draw my line. I'm dividing both sides by a negative 3. A negative 3 divided by a negative 3 is going to give me 1, which is what I want. Equal sign, and then I do 12 divided by a negative 3. Positive divided by a negative is a negative, so I get negative 4. And that would be my answer. The last one, number 9, I have negative 20 equals negative 5t. This time the variable is on the right-hand side. So I'm going to divide by the negative 5. And then negative 20 divided by negative 5. That goes away, and I get 4. Okay, so now you've seen how I want the work to be done. You need to show your work on all of these equations. Next we'll be doing two-step equations, and then we'll do multi-step equations. So it's very specific the way you need to show your work, so be sure to do that. Hope you have a great day.